Hello, people. I am trying this voiceover setup once again. I don't know, it's kind of fun. I feel like my ideas got across pretty well, but now I'm going to try it on a book that I need my notes for. So we'll see how that goes. I'll see what I think. I'm not married to this as, quote, the new format or anything like that. Maybe I'll pepper them in as I'm inclined, but let's see how it goes. This week, This week I read Babylon's Ashes by James S.A. Corey. Now what is this? Let me look. Let me look because I can get up and walk around. All right. Book 6. This is book 6 in the Expanse series, a series that I must admit I am loving. I bought all of these books. Now, this one is a little more disjointed, but a little more self-contained than book 5 was. Book 5 really needed you to have read one of the other books. This one, I think you could technically start on this one and sort of understand what's happening. I wouldn't personally recommend it on account of it's not the best one to start with because it jumps around in a kind of a way. I think at this point, the author's story is complex enough that it needs to leave itself openings, where the other books could be self-contained in the openings and the closings that they had, right? So if I start a storyline, I'm pretty much going to finish it in books 1 through 3, or maybe 1 through 4, but not this one. It leaves you hanging in certain ways that would be unfair to a reader if this is where you started. So I would suggest not starting with this one. I mean, I suppose if you're dead set, you're going to do it anyway. But I wouldn't, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone out there to do that. Our perspective now is Earth's been attacked in the last book. And so we pick up from the attacker's point of view. That is your Belters. So what they have is the OPA, which, you hear about in the other books, but you're seeing from, I guess, Earth or Martian perspective, more or less, who sees them basically as terrorists, which they kind of are, but in a storytelling term, perspective changes everything. You know, George Washington was a terrorist if you were British, but from an American point of view, he's a revolutionary, and one's good and one's bad. I'm not saying all terrorists are good. I'm just, we're going with the story here, people. The OPA is the Outer Planets Alliance. These are a group of people who decided to go live out in space. And their situation is that at a certain point, some of them have adapted to that life. With no gravity, your body elongates, this kind of an energy. And through that, they've developed a type of a particular to them culture, which is part of the reason they made these attacks on Earth. The attacks being, they yeeted comets down on the planet. Vicious. But it was to, in their minds, save this culture that's been created that they want to keep. On account of some of them in the new system being everyone on one of these new planets through the ring gates. Some of them aren't going to be able to go down to the planet because their bodies cannot adjust to gravity. And then they're like, well, I would just be slowly extinct. This is the energy they come with. But from the inside, we see that it's not unified at all. That it's Anderson Dawes, it's Fred Johnson, it's the Voltaire Collective. It's as varied as any other large group of humans is going to be. We're never autonomous, not autonomous. We're never monolithic in our thinking or our actions. So in this book, we get a good sense of how we're trying to take naturally diverse groups and weld them into a unit. Michio Pa, one of the captains we follow, and it's what is it? She's in a multi-marriage, which is just very good. This is some symbolism of the situation they're dealing with, wherein she is the wife to like 5 or 6 people. Some of them women, some of them men. They don't make a big deal about it, but it's a multi-marriage. Literally, they are all married to her. Not that they all have a bunch of different marriages. I guess that's an option too. We are talking about the future. And that's like representative of, right, the OPA, where all these groups are trying to marry themselves to Marco Anarius, the charismatic leader. And early on, you see the paranoia. It's a group that's used to being secretive, and it's hard for those secrets to come undone, which is a big chunk of this book. That chunk being uh, starting and winning revolutions versus ruling kingdoms, so to speak. Marcos is great at the fiery speech, at getting everyone going, at moving the ball, at making things happen. And these elements aren't always necessarily what you need to actually govern. I think Victor David Hanson has a book about this, where he talks about the need civilizations have for warrior generals and how they actually aren't the ideal of that civilization. Your grants, your patents, etc. throughout the years, they so in Grant's time it was honorable. You fought with honor. That's what Lee did. Grant fought a total war. I don't care if it's winter or summer. I don't care if you don't have food to eat. I'm doing everything in my power to prevent you from fighting. I'm going to harass your citizens. I'm going to, et cetera, et cetera. There was no limit to it. Total war is what he decided. And that was anti what the society itself wanted. And then, of course, he becomes president. But I believe his presidency didn't enact as much as other presidencies. It's hard for him to stop being that thing, that outside element, and then recontain himself into the civilization. I believe Patton was the same way. He could never stop being the bombastic leader to be a good politician, which at some point you need to be. This is what we're dealing with in this early part of the story. Because Marco, rather than now consolidating the things that he's won, just keeps moving forward with these big, grandiose, dreamlike ideas. And Michio's more grounded. Her job was to stop colony ships, that is, massive ships going to start colonies on new planets through the ring gates, and take their supplies to, quote, redistribute them to those who need them more, a la the belt. Now, this sounds good in the moment, but she has people working, or the OPA does, that run the numbers. The numbers being, right, we've damaged Earth. Earth produced X amount of foods and supplies out towards space. We, the OPA, the Outer Planets Alliance, need to find a way now that we've damaged Earth, established ourselves to provide those things which a damaged Earth cannot now provide. The next big bread basket was Ganymede, It was also damaged in a prior war. So I now have two bread baskets not producing food, and a large number, millions of them now, there are millions of belters who, I'm not saying they cannot grow their own food. This person's saying that if they don't start now, they won't be able to produce enough food. And it seems like a small thing, but it is kind of major. I live in Texas. And so you'll see when you drive around Texas, it is not uncommon to see 12 cows here in this large yard or 30 cows there in a larger yard, right? These aren't ranchers, so to speak, but there are a lot of groups that have lots of animals. And it's not just cows, it's just the ones you see from the road. Some will have chickens, some will have pigs, etc. And there's probably thousands of them across the state, 10,000s of them probably, of small individual growers. And all this collectively ends up in grocery stores in Texas. And then, of course, the bigger ones go out to other states. And when the economy gets bad, or when there's various laws that make this difficult, which has happened, you start to see the cows not there, right? They disappear. The person who owns that land doesn't put the 12 cows on their land. And it doesn't seem like that big a deal until downstream, right? So a year or two, maybe three after I start seeing those cows not there, I start noticing increases in price, right? Beef, pork, eggs. And it's a little thing, but a $2 increase on eggs has major impacts down the line. People start then worrying about, I can't buy this car, I need to buy used. Uh, Families move back home with parents, etc. All the things that happen in real life, right? But it's a sign of the time lag. And that's what this book brings up. This little thing, this little problem of food, is about to be catastrophic for the Outer Planets Alliance. Yes, they feel good, they're taking now. But these colony ships aren't reproducible. Once you take all the colony ships and you eat the food of a 2 or 3 year colony, what are you left with? Nothing. Because hydroponics should have taken this long to start growing. This is the problem that Michio Paul is presented with as the person dispensing the food. She wants this dealt with more. And Marco Anarius sort of doesn't. He's more interested in this other grandiose. I don't know what his end game was. I don't think he actually had one. But he's not interested in it. He's like, don't worry about that. That's for small people. I'm a big person. I don't have to deal with it. But Michio Paul doesn't have it in her to let it go, to say, I'm not going to look. Because she's there for the cause being helping belters. And in this, you start to see the cracks in Marco Anarius's wonderful setup here. Because Michio, and her backstory being, she finds herself falling, quote unquote, for the wrong leader. She fell for Fred Johnson, and then he abandoned her. She fell for, I forget the guy's name, the captain of the Behemoth who lost his mind, right? She seems to think that she was in line with Holden, and Holden let her down. But she finds herself attaching to a leader and then being abandoned by said leader. And she's conflicted that she's doing it again with Marco. That's what leads to this breakup, which leads to a mini civil war in amongst the OPA because Marco is not going to allow other side groups. He needs full control or nothing. The next big issue is back to Marcos's leadership style. He has a son, Philip, whose mom is from his mom's Naomi of the Rocinante crew. Bit of a twisted, tangled story there. But His ego, right? His ego won't allow him to let go of her. He just, in his mind, he can't imagine any woman not just being completely in love with him. He's also sort of controlling. So the fact that someone broke free of his control irks him. And these two things sort of are driving him crazy. But part of that ego is this son. And of course, if you think you're a Julius Caesar, if you think you're this great man in world history, there's no way you can look at your son and think anything less. That's my progeny, and he's going to be over boastful about it. Well, he's raised that kid like that. Yeah? The kid believes it. The kid loves his father. He's conflicted about the mom. The mom gave him, a heavy kind of a lesson, but he's conflicted now. And so he's looking because you get to an age, around 17 for some, maybe younger, maybe older, where what is it? You would stop idolizing your parents and start seeing the reality. That's what this kid's doing now. They get into a fight, I believe, with the Rocinante, and they lose. And some of what his mom told this Philip rings in his head as his dad acts the way she knew he would act. Because in the loss, he publicly blames the kid. He's like, you messed up. And he doesn't just blame him. He like shoves his face in it, makes him eat it. Right? He's real vicious about it. Because that's his nature. He's a manipulator. But the kid was raised as the son of the big shot. And that's in his chest. And he's not about to let it go. And we start to see this friction build up between them, where we're seeing through his eyes this idolized version of this person breaking apart. That's very cool. We see this issue in two parts. Early on, a tinge of it in the last book, but early on in this book, and then at the very end of this book. And that is the OPA has Martian vessels. Very fancy, very expensive Martian vessels. But Mars is very Spartan, is very militaristic in their entire government structure. So from the outside, we see that there was sort of an issue with the military. Through Alex, we understand it more of a coup. There was some kind of a power struggle within the planet itself, in which I want to say they say a third of their military defected. I mean, that's a huge deal. In amongst this was some of the ships that Marcos has are Martian and were used, at least the invisibility coating was used on the asteroids to make it so that it got through Earth's defenses. Now, no one's blaming Mars for this. Everyone's blaming the terrorists because the terrorists did it. But in my mind, there was always this question of why would such a strong military let this happen? But because the writing's so good and I'm 6 books in already, I'm willing to give the authors this sort of leeway. I'm going to give you some runway to work with this idea that you're cooking. And here we see that there's a fraction of this group that did break apart. And they're helping Marcos, one with ships, two with a railgun system. So in the rings, you go through the ring, and it's a slow zone. That's what they call it. It's not slow anymore, but it's a way station. And from that way station, you can go to 1,000 other worlds. This is the setup. In there was an alien core. On that core, they put up a railgun to defend anyone coming in because it's a huge railgun, and what can you do? You'll get obliterated. Martians end up sort of running that. And in amongst seeing that little space of a world, which again is part of the dispersed storylines because these aren't very crucial characters. When we go to this place, when we go to Alex on, was it Alex? What's his name? Um, Prax. When we go back to Prax on Ganymede, these aren't exactly crucial elements. They are elements in the story, but they're not as crucial as other elements have been. That's why I say this one's more disjointed than the other books. And if you're a long time reader, you're liking what you're getting, but a first time reader might not. This is one of those elements. Because when we're sitting in this slow zone with these belters, they give us, it's the first ship to come out of a ring gate that didn't go in first. That's the only sentence we get, but you understand that, oh, these Martians are building ships out there. They didn't settle. They didn't settle for taking, just going out. They're out there. They use some of the tech, and they've built a kind of a ship, the first of its kind. This alien tech is now seeping out. You wonder to what end? I'm not exactly sure, but it is exciting. And then at the very end, we get a warning that one of these rings, they say, they've named it, I forget the name, but they say the new Martian Republic, or they name themselves something like this, has claimed this ring. It is off limits, do not enter. It's just on a loop, broadcast out to any ship. You're not allowed to enter. It's theirs. We have a breakaway Martian something happening behind that ring, and I'm like, ooh, I'm very interested. I was glad I gave them the runway they needed. But it does explain the coup. If I'm already planning, if I found, okay, so military would be quick. I'm assuming theirs would be quicker because they're already in space. They have some of the highest tech ships, better than Earth. It means their scientists, their engineers are really good. And if the one planet Holden was on was some weird factory, there must have been a weapons planet somewhere or something to this effect. They found something that was worth enough for them to break away. Who knows who amongst it did it? I'm assuming an admiral with some kind of a vision of why limit ourselves to Mars? We're this space race, or I don't know what he was thinking. I'm very interested to find out who this cat was. He's been very shadowy so far. But they went and they took an entire planet, and they've already been able to mod the tech to make ships. It's very interesting. I'm extremely interested. I hope it starts in the next book. Now, this one has more of a build up to a battle than any of the others. The others, you sort of get caught in a battle and you have to fight your way out, or you were dealing with the proto molecule. This is no proto molecule. This is sort of Holden versus Marcos. It's one ship versus a bunch. And Earth is going to need those planets now more than ever. So it almost is backfiring Marcos's plan because this is making planet side people more desirous of the resources other planets can have, because we have billions have already died, but we're going to have billions more starved to death if they can't leave Earth and start anew. But everything's in sort of a lockdown mode unless something can crack the egg. I need some way to draw Marcos's ships. I need some way to stop the arsonists from starting fires all over the place so that I can start putting the leg forward as the new alliance sort of between Earth, Mars, and nice belters. I need a way to put this alliance on a footing that's aggressive instead of defensive. The plan they come up with is to attack the slow zone. That Marcos has gotten control of the behemoth. They need to get control back. That will buy enough time for the new alliance forces to make moves on Marcos, start the ball rolling their way. That's their plan. The problem with it being, of course, the large rail gun inside. What they decide to do, and it's very fun, very action packed. It was going to be some kind of plan from Fred Johnson, but he ends up dying in one of these battles. Very sad. And so it's up to Holden. What they decide to do is to load a large ship with drive, with essentially just engines, space drive engines. There's no spot for a crew. It's essentially the engine and the computer needed to run the engine. And the ship's going to offload 9,000 of these, shoot them through the ring gate because the railgun's set to shoot drivetrains. It doesn't know that they're not real ships. So it's going to fire away, and in the firing, we can get one ship to land on it, take out the railgun with Bobby, Martian herself. This is what they do. But we needed the Rossi to defend this ship going out, and we can't assume Marcos isn't going to see us. Well, Marcos sees us. Marcos understands it's the Rocinante, and he's obsessed. He insta-turns all the wolves on him. And so now they're stuck. Their options are, because one ship versus 20, it's not going to happen. He has good enough ships. The Rocinante can't outgun it. They take the behemoth, but they can't outgun it. Their options are to run, right? There's all these gates. You could pick one and try and hide. But Holden doesn't want to do that. Neither does Naomi. She wants this over with. She's tired of this ex. She's tired of the whole situation. But the railgun's out. They can't fix it. They're just waiting. They know the ships are coming. They're just waiting to sort of, I guess, die honorably. In the interim, Naomi starts looking at the original problem, I believe, from not this book, but the book before, which is ships disappearing. Now, she didn't find out what's happening to the ships, where they're going, if it was the protomolecule. All she finds out, all she comes to realize, is there's a weight limit. Some of these colony ships were just too big, overloaded, and that the gate only allows so much through. For whatever reason, the aliens made it this way. There's a weight limit. And so what she says, she's like, why don't we use that? Why don't we load up this original ship that brought all the drivetrains past that weight limit? And then if we send it through at roughly the time we think Marcos is coming through, because computers can track this thing, and unless he slows down, which they're assuming now, that's what you got to do in naval battles, is assume. They're assuming he's not going to slow down, that he's going to be confident, that they're all going to come in at once. And he wants to roll in and get his lady back and, dance the Rocinante around in the carcass of James Holden and be a big shot. That's what they're banking on. So if they send this ship through at the same time, it triggers that overload. And then the system, the alien ring system, it just disintegrates or does whatever it does to the ships. So here we have it. They think they timed it, but they're just sitting watching. If this doesn't work, they die. If it works, they live. So from their perspective, from Marco's perspective, he starts coming through the gate. And then he just sort of sees white, this bright light, and he's seeing himself as molecules or some mess like this. And everything just goes white, and that's it. And from their perspective, they see this small fleet of 20 ships, Marcos at the head of them, start coming through the gate, and they just disappear. And so what I had half a book of my heart beating, thinking, my crew could be going to Custard's Last Stand, a crew that I love. I end up just snap of the fingers. All the problems just disappeared. And Amos says what I was thinking. He goes, look at that. And that's it, problem gone. and you're just sitting there as shocked as they are, which is, I would say good writing if I'm feeling what the characters are feeling. Just shocked that just the problem just disintegrated in front of me. Afterwards, in the drawdown, we get an idea of a solution. We need some way to not be at war anymore, right? I can't just be having people chuck rocks at planets. It's inappropriate. Mars is hurt. Half the third of their army's gone, and Earth's damaged, and the belt is in trouble. So Holden's idea is sort of what my idea was in one book ago, where we have 1,000 planets that we're about to try and inhabit. And then we have a group of people expert at traversing the void. The Belters are really great spacemen. They know how to keep the seals up. They know how to keep their ships working with, less than ideal conditions. They'll understand the weight limits. They'll stick to them religiously. Then once we're through various ring gates, they'll be able to facilitate the transference of goods, which everyone's going to need, because I don't want to have to set up refineries everywhere. I need things to work quicker. So excess food needs to come off these planets to feed other people. Money needs to go into these planets to build other stuff, et cetera, right? I need this economy going quicker because I'm looking at two groups starving to death if it doesn't. Earth and the Martians, specifically the Martians. So that would be their onus. It will be tenuous because who could not judge these Belters for having sent asteroids to Earth? But a sinking ship needs all hands. This is the energy we go with. And Holden thought they would ask him to lead this sort of spacing guild. His name, he's really partial to it. But they end up asking Michio Pa, who at first doesn't want it, which is probably a clear sign she should have it. And this is sort of how our story ends, with the big cliffhanger of whatever this Martian planet was. With this mystery, semi, right? Either it's just a weight limit or there's something up with the protomolecule. And tangentially, off in the distance, is the protomolecule itself and what it's doing, if it's doing anything. And the problem of whatever got rid of this whole civilization, we're not thinking about it as much, but it hadn't gone anywhere. And I think there's 9 books in, and I'm on book 6, so there's not many books left to clear it all up. But I'm confident they can. If they scrub the landing, I'll be very disappointed because so far this series has been nothing but fantastic. And I can't, it's not Tolkien and it's not Dune, meaning I haven't finished. I know I can recommend those because I've finished them and understand what they are. I'm just confident I could recommend these books. I'll be disappointed. I'll make an addendum and say, if they fail in the end, this whole series sucked. But so far, I've been very happy, and these have been very good books. And now is it time for our ads? Yes, it is. These are my books. You can buy them to help the channel. You can get Kindle Unlimited and read them on that. And other books, in which case, if my books suck, you wouldn't have lost any money because you still get value reading other books. You can comment on videos. I try and answer all of them. You can like and subscribe. All these things help. I am mainly doing this I'm going to read anyway, and I can't help but yap about books, so I might as well do it here. Also, it'd be a good spot to, advertise for my book and make sales. So that's why I tricked all of you into this. If you're still listening, you've been tricked. I did it. Okay, people. I think we're done. I will talk to you all next week.